conscience, the beautiful soul, evil, and its forgiveness. The antinomy of the moral worldview has given us duty located in the beyond, but also demanded down here. It has solved moral contradictions by displacing them into some other transcendent self-consciousness. Now, however, the moral self-consciousness has reabsorbed this transcendent being into itself and recognized itself as absolutely valid in its contingency. Its immediate particular existence is the true reality and harmony. The self of conscience is to be contrasted with its predecessors. A. The self of the legal person whose existence consists in being acknowledged by others. B. The absolutely free self, which is the end product of the realm of culture. C. The moral self, involved in the oscillating displacements of universality and individuality. In conscience, we, for the first time, give content to the empty pattern of duty, right, and the pure will, and lend it authentic existence. Conscience heals the various breaches across which moral displacement has woven its dialectic. The breach between what is intrinsic and what is a matter of myself, between the pure end and the opposed factors of nature and sensibility. Conscience is morality become complete, which never submits its decisions to the empty arbitrament of some general standard. For conscience, the intrinsically right is what it is inwardly sure of. It converts the given case before it into something which consciousness itself has produced. It does not attempt the case before it into a variety of pre-existent duties between which it must decide. It alone can determine its duty in the concrete, making short work of conflicting prima facie claims. Conscience does not consider itself as impure in relation to a transcendent morality, nor does it refer the pluralization of the pure principles of duty to a transcendent conscience. It abandons all positions which contrast duty with reality. It recognizes duty as concrete action, not as pure abstraction, encapsulated in what is not duty. It is immediately certain of itself, this certainty being its own conviction regarding its own self, and not meant to hold for other persons. The moral consciousness only grasps the underlying essence of the moral, whereas in conscience it is self-consciousness. Conscience does not oppose itself to an alien nature subject to independent laws. As absolute negativity, it can identify itself with and so confer validity on a finite content. Conscience gives universal validity to the actions of the individual self. This validity is derivatively a validity for others, who recognize its validity for the self in question. Anyone's conscientious action is recognized as absolute right by the whole community of conscientious persons. Such universal recognition is not found in the moral realm, where the rightness of acts is always in doubt. In the realm of conscience, absolute conviction of rightness is absolute rightness. At this level, there can be no question of good intentions which have gone astray or misfortunes which attend upon the good. What the individual thinks is admitted as right for that individual by all. At the threshold of the sphere of spirit, we were concerned with the honest consciousness absorbed in the cause itself, which was a predicate of the subject rather than the subject itself. In conscience, the task or cause itself is the subject. It includes in itself the aspect of social substantiality derived from the ethical sphere, the aspect of external authorization derived from the sphere of culture, and the self-knowing essentiality of morality. In conscience, the subject sees all these movements in and as himself, and seeing them as his moments, he has power and sovereignty over them all. Conscience tries in some manner to consider the circumstances and consequences of action in all their detail, but it also knows and is not dismayed by the fact that these circumstances and consequences ramify infinitely in all directions, and that it is wholly futile to attempt to take account of them all in one's action. It is for others to pursue the investigation of circumstances ever further. Conscience must act on its own incomplete knowledge, which, because it is its own, is sufficient and complete. Conscience has to consider all the prima facie duties which come up in concrete cases, but none of them has authority for it. It must determine which is overriding. In doing so, its own naturalness, its impulses and inclinations must play a part. Only this can break through the circle of inauthentic prescriptions derived from others. Conscience must exercise its arbitrament, and this must rest ultimately on its own impulsive and emotional makeup. It is the arbitrament of the individual subject which alone determines the content of duty in given cases. Other individuals might regard this determination as a fraud, since they consider other aspects of the matter. An action that seems violently unjust to others may be an act of justified self-assertion to the person concerned. An action which others see as cowardly may be a prudent conservation of oneself and one's usefulness to the man in question. Since morality consists merely in the consciousness of having done one's duty, any content can be moral and must be considered as such by others. It is no good saying that the content of conscience should have been otherwise. Its essence is arbitrariness. One cannot say that it should have been directed to the general rather than the individual good, for the general good only has definite meaning if one brings in the social laws which override individual conviction, and these conscience will not admit. And any act the individual does for his own good can be plausibly defended as for the good of all. The balancing of goods against goods is moreover something that conscience by its essence cuts short. Conscience is spirit sure of itself, fully possessed, and apprised of its duty. Anything which exists is demonstrated to be mere moment. It is only in so far as it knows of that it counts. Conscience has no content. It must decide whether to disobey or obey any law it has the power to bind or loose. Conscientious acts exist as such for others. They are acknowledged as conscientious by other conscientious persons and are put on a level with their conscientious acts. There is, however, always some doubt whether other consciousness will endorse the determinations of the individual conscience. Conscience therefore oscillates hopefully between self-doubt derived from the reactions of others and its own self-certainty. Conscientious people, trusting the integrity of their own consciences, cannot help impugning the soi-disant conscientious deliverance of others and thinking that they are products of morally bad consciences. Only if an act is truly conscientious must it be acknowledged as morally right by all. Otherwise, it counts as a mere expression of personal preference. Only a man's consciousness of situations, not the real result of his acts, is morally relevant and acknowledged as such by others. Language is the medium in which spirit or social subjectivity exists. Through language, one personal ego recognizes the ego status of another personal ego and so transcends its separate individuality. In moral discourse, the moral consciousness loses its dumbness and becomes universal. One man utters his conviction of duty, which is understood as such by others. Nothing counts except that others are assured that the man himself is assured of doing his duty. The conscientious agent cannot admit questions as to whether or not he is acting from a true sense of duty, since he admits no distinctions of absolute duty from the individual's conscious determination of it. If a man says he is acting conscientiously, he is. Conscience in its sublime majesty can put what content it wills into its knowing and its willing. It is the moral genius which knows the voice of its inner intuition to be divine. It is likewise the creativity that can make any action to be right. To follow conscience is to practice a religion of self-worship. This lonely religion is also communal, and holds for all who speak the language of conscience and are conscientiously pure in purpose. This sort of pure conscientiousness is wholly empty. One is assured of always being right without regard to what one is right about. Consciousness, the relation of mind to something objective, has vanished into empty self-consciousness, and what we have is really the untruths of moral consciousness rather than its truths. What emerges out of this emptying of morality is the beautiful soul, which is too fine to commit itself to anything. It lacks force to externalize itself and endure existence. It does not want to stain the radiance of its pure conscientiousness by deciding to do anything particular. It keeps its heart pure by fleeing from contact with actuality and preserving impotence. Its activity consists in yearning, and is like a shapeless vapor fading into nothingness. Conscience has yet to be considered as acting. It gives empty universal duty to a determinate content drawn from its own self, and from that self as natural individuality. Self-certainty is the primary factor for conscience, the universal Ansicht that takes a second place. For the universal consciousness represented by other people, the absolute certainty of conscience is essentially evil and hypocritical.